The proposed target of an apparent murder for hire request has decided to divorce his wife because police say she's the one behind the alleged plot. Star of Ghost Adventures, Goodwin, is now dealing with his own nightmare. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So I can't say I'm terribly surprised by this, but Goodwin, the star on Ghost Adventures on Discovery Plus, who's dealing with something potentially even scarier than the supernatural. Remember, his wife of several years, Victoria Goodwin, has been charged with plotting to have him killed. Well, now the 48-year-old has filed for divorce. This happened on March 12th, so this is about a week after news broke that 32-year-old Victoria had been arrested. She faces charges of solicitation to commit murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She's currently locked up in Nevada, where the couple lived, on $100,000 bail. And Us Weekly got a look at these divorce documents, which read, "The views, tastes, likes, and dislikes of husband and wife have become incompatible to the extent that it has become impossible for them to live together in marital harmony. There is no possibility of reconciliation." Now, we'll talk about what that means, but according to the legal documents that Goodwin filed in Clark County, Nevada, he and Victoria had apparently got married in May of 2020. This was during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, it's not entirely clear if they actually ended up tying the knot then or they waited later on. We saw these photos of this lavish celebration at Disneyland's Haunted Mansion that were posted on social media, but here's what we know. Investigators say just a few short years later, Victoria was allegedly communicating with an infamous inmate, and you may know who this is. We'll talk about it in a second. But the two were allegedly scheming to hire a third party to kill Goodwin. Those are the accusations. Now, to talk about this, I want to bring on friend of the show, Randy Kessler, who is a high-profile family attorney, divorce attorney in the Atlanta area. Randy, it's so good to see you. First, I think the last time I did this, I don't remember if I had a guest. I might have had a guest. I might have done it solo, but I think the people I've spoken to about this, I'm just curious, their initial reaction to a story like this.
Oh, it's like, look, believe it or not, divorce lawyers are human, right? And despite all the stuff we see, this is a shocker. And I thought I've seen it all. Every now and then people joke in our office, God, wouldn't it be easier or cheaper just to kill my spouse? And it's sort of an off the cuff, sort of a Freudian moment where they say, I really hate this person, but never do we see it go this far, except when it's something that Law&Crime is covering. And those are the extreme cases.
So in other words, you don't usually see murder for hire plots in connection with divorce proceedings?
No, I would say that would be an exception.
Okay, then walk me through this. And let me read it again. What does "the views, tastes, likes, and dislikes of husband and wife have become incompatible to the extent that it has become impossible for them to live together in marital harmony. There is no possibility of reconciliation." What does that all mean?
So that's legal terminology or a lawyer sense or lawyer speak for the marriage is broken beyond repair. So in every state in the United States now, as opposed to 50 years ago, you can get a divorce by saying, I can't make my marriage work. That's called a no-fault divorce. It doesn't mean you can't talk about why you got divorced or how that affects property division or custody. But to authorize the judge to grant you a divorce, you have to swear that your marriage is no longer viable, that it's broken beyond repair. And the wording differs in every state. Some states it's irretrievably broken. Some states it's irreconcilable difference. Some states it's, broken beyond repair. So that's what that wording means, is that judge, regardless of why they're getting a divorce, in this petitioner's mind, his marriage is over. Therefore, you are authorized to grant him a divorce. Then you can get into why if you want to.
Well, let me just back that up a second. If she is currently in jail on these charges, what ability does she have to contest the divorce in some way or represent her interests in the divorce?
So she can hire a lawyer and she can contest the divorce. And, it's hard to get somebody on video from jail, especially for a civil case. There's not as many protections. But she may get a stay. We're actually in the middle of a representation of somebody, a high-profile individual whose spouse was detained by ICE. And so they got a brief continuance. But it's not going to last forever. Eventually, the spouse that's not in jail has the right to proceed with their divorce and move forward, and that will ultimately be granted. So she can contest it. And I'll also tell you this, Jesse, there are very few things that you can get unilaterally in a divorce, very few things that only one side has to say, I want it, and they get it. And one is a divorce. The other one might be your maiden name. If a woman wants to restore her maiden name, the husband can't object to that and say, I don't want that to happen. But if one side wants a divorce, no matter how much the other side pleads and begs and tells the judge, he'll come back to me, change his mind. All they have to do is convince the judge that that person, the husband in this case, can't make it work. And that person is then entitled to a divorce.
Okay, so what I'm about to say is totally off topic. I'm giving you that fair warning right now, but there is an issue that is affecting a lot of people out there, and I really didn't even think about it until we partnered up with our new sponsor, Dermazine. I'm talking about dandruff. Most people assume it's just from a dry scalp, but it's actually caused by an overgrowth of fungus called Malassezia, and that fungus, it feeds on the oils inside most shampoos, even some of the ones from dermatologists, but that is where our sponsor Dermazine comes in. So Dermazine's clinically tested overnight serum has a 92% success rate and nearly 3,000 positive testimonies. So while you sleep, it disrupts the biofilm around the fungus, which most dandruff shampoos never touch, so you can target flakes at the source. And right now, you can get their scalp relief system for an extra 10% off plus free shipping. And that includes the overnight serum, dermatologist recommended shampoo, a scalp scrubber to clear buildup and boost circulation. So experience flake-free confidence every day. Go to dermazine.com/sidebar for an extra 10% off and free shipping, or tap the link below to get yours today. So according to People, Aaron requested that neither he nor his, estranged wife, neither party, be awarded alimony, that both he and Victoria's community assets and debts, I believe he was saying that they would be divided in accordance with Nevada law. And at the same time, he has requested that his own separate assets and debts be determined to be his sole property, his separate property, and that he be awarded reasonable costs and expenses and attorney's fees. Break that down for us and what the likelihood is that he'll succeed in getting that.
Okay. Number one, that's very standard, right? You don't put your settlement offer into your documents that you're sending to the court. You don't say, Judge, I would settle for this, or I would take that. You put in there what you want if you can't settle the case. So it's an invisible preamble, so to speak. Judge, in the event we can't settle the case or mediate the case or bring a conclusion outside of court, and we have to appear before you, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. And that's very typical with the statement that you just read to me was, if there's marital property, it gets divided according to law. If there's separate property, meaning I had it before the marriage, or I inherited it, or someone gave it specifically to me, I want to keep that. And impliedly, she should get to keep hers. That's the starting point. Then when you get to court, you get to argue, but Judge, the cost, like you mentioned, Jesse, she caused this. I wouldn't have gotten a divorce but for her plot to kill me, and I had to file for divorce, and I had to pay a lawyer, and I had to come to court. So if we get that far, Judge, I want you to do everything else that I asked, and I want her to pay my legal costs because she caused this.
Let me ask you a question. She hasn't been convicted, right? But she has been charged. Does the fact that she has been charged in terms of an evidentiary point of view or what he can argue in court, is that sufficient to help his cause in a divorce proceeding or anybody's cause? So like you said, if you have two parties, one of them is arrested and charged or facing charges, can they use that, the simple charges themselves, not even the conviction, the charges themselves, in their advantage in a divorce proceeding?
Certainly. I mean, there's two ways. Number one, even though you're innocent until proven guilty, everybody in America, when someone gets arrested, they think maybe he did it, maybe she did it. You can't help it. That's just human nature. So that's the one way. But the more legal way is that there's a difference, right, in standards in the criminal case. In a criminal case, they would have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I know you discuss this all the time. In a civil case, you just have to have enough to tip the scale. And you have to have enough to tip the scale probably to get her arrested, right? So if someone made the decision to arrest her based on the information they saw, then there's some evidence out there that persuaded that person to do that, meaning the judge can rely reasonably on the fact that there's some bad stuff out there about her. That's probably enough to get his foot in the door, so to speak. Is she going to be convicted? Who knows? Does she have to be convicted for him to be able to use it against her? Absolutely not. We see that all the time. Spouse hurts another spouse. There's criminal accusations. We go to court and they enter a civil protective order, right? Stay away from the spouse, even though they haven't been convicted of anything, because it's a lower standard in civil cases.
I want to lay it out a little bit more. So people might be looking at this and saying, I don't really know what this case is about. Well, according to the criminal complaint that was filed against Victoria in October of last year, she had apparently started this pen pal relationship with a Florida inmate, an inmate named Grant Amato. Now, that name may sound very familiar to you because, first of all, he's been the subject of the popular Paramount Plus documentary, Control-Alt-Desire. We actually covered his Florida trial gavel to gavel here on the Law&Crime Network. And his case was fascinating as it was chilling because he was accused of killing his entire family, mom, dad, brother, because they were trying to keep him from spending insane amounts of money on a webcam girl that he'd never met in real life but swore he was in love with. Just to give you an idea, here's a taste of what prosecutors had to say during his trial in 2019.
I'm going to tell you what the state submits is what actually happened. Grant fell in love with a woman named Sylvie. Not only did he fall in love with her, he became obsessed with her, to the point where that was all that mattered to him. He had lost his job, he was depressed, he was having a contentious relationship with his father and his brother. He finds Sylvie and becomes consumed with her. Now, you haven't seen these, they're in evidence. But these are bank records from the Amatos. Okay? Credit card statements, checking account statements. And you, by all means, I implore you to look through these. And when you do, you will see a compendium, of charges to the MyFreeCams website. I just picked, here's a random page. And for the record, this was Exhibit 350. It's dated, this particular page is dated November 20th. And on November 20th, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 transactions, each $599.99. That's hundreds, by the way, not $5, for this particular website to tip this woman. On the 21st, the next day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 transactions for almost $600 a piece, $599.99. And it goes on, guys. I mean, I'm not going to belabor the point, but look at it. According to my notes, and I'm not good at math, fair warning, $20,000 in one night.
Now, his defense attorneys argued that the lack of physical evidence against him was enough to raise reasonable doubt.
Don't check your common sense at the door, okay? A lot of families have crisis, whether it be drugs, whether, it could be a lot of things. This is kind of an unusual thing, granted. This is something, to do with this Bulgarian lady. But nevertheless, Grant was part of the family. The family was pulling together. Jason testified to that. Jason testified that everybody was coming back together. Now, his significant other, not wife, but basically his wife, Christy Vernell, once again, I'm sorry for her loss, but she was forthright. There was a time during her testimony, though, that she did say that Jason received a phone call from Chad. She kind of mumbled a little bit, no, it wasn't that night. But the gist of it is that the phone call was normal. The family was coming together here, okay? Now, Arthur Rubart, the crime scene investigator, testified again for the second time, and this time was the hotel. And the hotel, the first hotel that Grant went to, that's an important crime scene. That is a very important crime scene because that is where Grant went from his car to the hotel, and that's what he testified to, and we know that's the truth. We know that's the truth. Nothing was found, no blood, no blood, no DNA of anyone else, nothing incriminating was found. And that goes back to the scene. That was a bloody mess. It is what it is, and I don't want to show you pictures of it. How in the world was Grant Amato able to do all these things without getting a scintilla of blood on himself?
In the end, though, Grant Amato was found guilty of all counts, and because the prosecution was also seeking the death penalty against him, the trial then went into a penalty phase, where it was up to the jury to determine if Amato would get death or a sentence of life in prison.
These deliberations by you as individual jurors are moral in nature. There's no right decision or wrong decision. If two of you disagree as to what the sentence should be, guess what? You're both right. There is no wrong decision, and you will have fulfilled your duty. So your job is to find the right answer. Mr. Stone is going to be making his arguments that the right answer is death. We on the defense, we are going to be making the argument that life is the appropriate sentence. Life without the possibility of parole, meaning that Grant Amato will be behind prison bars for the rest of his life. He sits here today 30 years old. That means he's probably looking at 40, 50 years behind bars, and he'll never get out. And that's a consideration that you should think about.
Now, here was something interesting. Amato's only surviving brother, Jason, just imagine what it's like for him, testified during the penalty phase.
I cannot give an exact number of how many people have felt the loss in my family, but there were hundreds of people at their funeral. The minister that led the service told me in his 50 years, he has never seen a funeral with 3 caskets. It has been very hard to devote reflection to either my father, mother, or brother. As I start to think of one, it's hard to not think of the others. There are so many memories, stories, and special times that I will never forget. However, I will never be able to make new ones. The toughest thing in all this is how it continues to affect my girls, especially the kids. Christina misses the stories and comfort my family gave, particularly my mom, who always made her feel like a daughter. There are certain things Christina adored about my mom. She could light up a room with her smile and go with the flow personality. Our daughters, they're troubled daily. Nightmares, depression, confusion, fear, and having to live lives in the public eye. They miss the days at the barn with my mom, who taught them both how to ride. There are numerous occasions I can think of, but to get to the real question, or how this has affected me, plain and simple, 2019 has been a tragic year. Too many tragedies for anyone to handle, let alone the children. It's just so hard to go through the grieving process when there are multiple losses and uncertainty in the future.
Despite everything that's happened and all the loss that you've suffered and everything, do you love your brother, Grant Amato?
Yes.
Okay.
And the jury sentenced Grant Amato to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each of the victims. And as I mentioned, Amato's case was featured in this Paramount Plus documentary, which apparently led Victoria to reach out to him in Florida in October of last year, according to court records. And this alleged plot to kill Aaron Goodwin came to light when a corrections officer confiscated a cell phone that Amato apparently had in his prison cell, searched it, found these messages, or these alleged messages, between Amato and Victoria. In fact, according to the Daily Mail, in one message, Victoria appears to have written, "Am I a bad person because I chose to end his existence, not divorce?" Randy, going back to you, you may have a particular feeling on that, as you mentioned, in your circle, in your industry. I mean, if these allegations are true, this is not the first time somebody would resort to drastic measures as opposed to divorce proceedings. So that's quite the statement right there. Your take on this?
Yeah, that might be the proverbial smoking gun. You know, if you say something like that in therapy, and that's why therapy is, privileged. That's why you can talk to a psychologist and say, I hate my spouse. Sometimes I just want to kill my spouse. You're trying to work through stuff to get over those feelings. And, you want to be able to talk about that stuff in therapy. But when you're saying to a convicted felon, am I a bad person because I've done that? That's going to be used against her.
Convicted murderer. Convicted murderer.
Yeah, how do you get around that? She's going to have to plead. I mean, I don't understand how she's going to go to trial with that hanging out there.
She's of the opinion, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit more, that she never was serious about this, that she never really wanted the wheels in motion. She was fantasizing about it. But let me ask you generally, I mean, in your practice, I'm sure you see where one of the reasons people get separated or divorced is they're looking for something outside of their marriage. Physical, emotional. What can you tell us about that?
I think that is the reason for divorce. I don't mean affairs, but in general, people are looking for happiness. There's that old joke that divorce isn't about money, it's about happiness. Whereas one of my clients once told me it's just about being less miserable, right? So people will try things. They'll try diets and working out and vacationing. And when all that fails, eventually they'll say, well, maybe if I didn't have my spouse, I would be happy. Maybe that would bring me happiness. Maybe getting rid of that thing that's causing me unhappiness will help me be happy. And, there are 2 basic ways to get rid of your spouse, right? There's the divorce way, which is the preferred way. And there's murder or running away and stealing your children and going to another country, which I guess is the 3rd way. And people say divorce is bad, but considering those 3 options, divorce is a pretty darn good way to solve that problem. And sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes getting rid of the spouse by divorce does bring happiness. Sometimes it doesn't. But, that's usually the last resort. People have tried everything else to get rid of what they think causes them to be unhappy.
And what's shocking is, and we're going to get more into this criminal case in a second, but what's shocking is when we first brought this story to everybody and talked about it, you look at their social media history, you would have no idea that there were problems in the marriage. You would have no idea that this was allegedly going on. How many times do you see that in your practice where you see two people, they look like the happiest people on earth, and you have no idea the issues that are surrounding that marriage?
Every day, every day, every day. And people say nobody in our family and nobody in our community would ever think that we're going to get a divorce. But I've been unhappy for years. And there are hundreds of reasons. Sometimes somebody's gay and they can't stay in a relationship and be dishonest and nobody knows and they've been covering it up. There are a whole bunch of reasons. Also, we represent a lot of people that are on TV, people that have a public following, and they've got to present well to the public. They've got to present an image of happiness, contentness, because that's what the public wants, public consumes. So when it happens, it's not just a shock to their family and friends, it's a shock to everybody. But usually they know and their spouse knows, and both of them usually know that something's not right. In this case, it seems like only one of them knew that something wasn't right. That's what's bizarre to me.
So let me get a little bit more into this and about the case. So there are court documents that lay out these messages that Victoria allegedly sent when Goodwin was in California filming Ghost Adventures. And police say, they allege, that Victoria gave Amato her husband's filming schedule and his hotel location. And that way, Goodwin would be killed outside of Nevada and it would be less likely to connect back to Victoria. At least that's arguably what seems to have been the thinking based on these allegations. And the criminal complaint revealed some of these texts, as reported by the Daily Mail, where the inmate, Grant Amato, messaged this alleged hitman saying, "He's asleep right now in the hotel room. I need to know what's going on. Can I get an update? Was it done?" And authorities claim Victoria agreed to pay this hitman a total of $11,515, very specific there, with an upfront payment of $2,500. And despite his alleged role in this scheme, Amato has not been charged by Nevada prosecutors in connection with the alleged attempted contract killing. Now, a source told Us Weekly that Goodwin was stunned by the charges against his wife and what was allegedly going on. And so were his fellow cast and crew members on Ghost Adventures. According to the source, there had been no indications that there were any problems in their marriage. By the way, in case you're not familiar with it, Ghost Adventures follows paranormal investigator Zach Baggins and his team, which includes Goodwin, as they explore haunted locations all over the world. Baggins and Goodwin have been part of the show since 2008. Now, Randy, would you expect friends, coworkers that you've been close to for decades, long periods of time, to be able to pick up on tension, strangeness in a relationship?
You would think, but marriage is a strange thing. They could be going through a hard time. If it wasn't obvious to her husband, and also, by the way, the spouse is usually the last one to know that the other spouse is not happy or the other spouse is cheating, because if you're living in that fog of, my marriage is good and we're reality TV stars. But there's so many things here, Jesse. There's so many issues. I mean, her following up on, is it done yet? That might be the last straw. If her defense is really, this was a fantasy, like an affair we hear all the time. It was just an emotional affair. We were just flirting. I would never follow up on it. If this is the equivalent of that, I just wanted to see, because I'm in this reality world where we see strange things, and I want to see if somebody actually would kill my husband for money. When she writes and says, is it done yet? Am I bad for not divorcing him?
Let me give you what she said, okay, or what she allegedly said. So, by the way, per reporting from Fox News, according to an arrest report, after that documentary aired, Victoria had allegedly reached out to Amato, wrote him, described to him that she was lonely, she was connecting with him. But this is what's interesting. So she apparently denies trying to kill Aaron. In the arrest report, she says that she described herself as sometimes daydreaming of being in a different situation, but she no longer felt that way. She also stated she didn't remember sending these particular messages, and Victoria expressed her feeling of wanting to be without Aaron and with Amato, which she described as fantasy and daydreams. Randy, your thoughts?
I think that plays right into what I was saying. That's exactly it. And that's going to be her defense, that she was fantasizing about it, that she was daydreaming about it. But daydreaming with him and, putting it in text messages, this is not in therapy. This is not amongst your friends where you're gossiping with your best friends or your BFFs saying, hey, what do you think about this? This is, offering to pay money. This is dangerous. I mean, the best thing that happened in her criminal case, and again, I don't do a lot of criminal law, is that the murder didn't happen, right? I mean, she's going to say this was something that didn't happen. It was obviously a fantasy. And why would I pick somebody like that who really, he's not known for going out and hiring hitmen. He was known for killing his own family. Also, I think that she probably thought he was a good target for her because he liked to have these virtual relationships. He was into getting online and talking to people virtually and figuring out maybe fantasies for him would be that he could have a fantasy relationship with her. So she was going to use that to her advantage. She's got a lot of stuff there that she can use, but there's going to be some serious psychological testimony needed to explain why she did what she did, because she did something, right? She communicated with him. She can't hide from the text. She can't hide from the communications. Why? Why did she do it? I'm waiting for the mental health defense to come up, but it's not an insanity defense, right? It's not a murder defense. She's just off the deep end. And the fact is, it doesn't seem like she has a big psychological history, right? She's not been institutionalized. She's not been in a facility for mental issues. I would imagine that's coming. I imagine her lawyers are looking at that as a possible out for why she would even say things like this, because you have to explain it to a jury.
Or break that connective tissue, right? Try to say, hey, listen, I might have said these things, but it's tough with the payments if they could track it back there, but basically say, I never wanted it to go this far. You hear that defense, right? I never wanted it to go this far. It was Grand Amato, or it was a third party who took it to that next level. I was shocked that that happened.
We call it buyer's remorse. Oops, I got caught. Now I'm sorry I did it.
Yeah, again, if all the allegations are true, right? The money, giving the travel schedule, the messages, it's a problem. It's a problematic case. But she is innocent until proven guilty. We'll see what the case is there. I did want to do one more thing. I wanted to take a look at how people online are reacting to this story. So we checked out the Ghosted Vendors subreddit to see what fans had to say. And for example, you had one fan who wrote, I'm still confused about all this. I remember staying pretty up to date with their socials a few years ago. And even though I believe there was a pretty big age gap between them, they really seemed to be so in love, always going to theme parks and conventions and geeking out over the same things together. And now she wants him dead. By the way, Randy, we talked about the idea of social media maybe not reflecting real life issues, if you want to touch on that, but also I think there was a 16-year age gap there. Is that anything that we should be thinking about? I mean, I've heard, relationships that distance, but also, is it interesting to you?
It's interesting to me. I see age differences much greater. I see them, much smaller. I don't think the age difference in and of itself matters so much in the divorce. Except that, why would she do something like this? And people are going to say she was young and foolish and not mature. I mean, that's the only thing I can think the age difference does. Was she in it for the money, for the fame? Is she always looking for the next big thing? Oh, shiny, there's something new out there. First, it's the older guy. Then it's the reality TV. Now it's this guy who's in jail for murder. Maybe he helps her. So there's something wrong with her, clearly. Maybe the fact that she's a lot younger than him plays into the fact that maybe he should have seen warning signs. When you marry someone that's born in a different generation, you need to get to know them a little better. But I couldn't attribute who she is or what she's done simply to her age. But yeah, that's a little warning sign. There's certainly age difference does trigger some antenna in my mind.
There's a couple other Reddit comments I wanted to point out. You had one that said, shout out to the corrections officer who did his job, confiscated the inmate's contraband, took the time to look at his correspondences. He's our hero of the hour. Without them, we could have lost Aaron in a terrible way. So thank you, corrections officer. That's a really good point there. And here's another comment. This is so sad. Honestly, imagine the person you would think loves you the most in the world, the person that you most likely love the most, doesn't want to just leave you, but actually wants for you to not even exist in this world anymore and take steps to extinguish your life rather than just leave. I really feel for Aaron in this mess. I hope he can find real happiness with somebody else soon. So, I mean, look, that's a good point. Aside from the sad nature of this, and obviously we go back full circle about why he's filing for divorce in light of this, but also, yeah, got to call it the corrections officers for seeing this and alerting authorities to this, right? Right, Randy?
Yeah, both of those. And congrats and thank you to the corrections authority and to that viewer, that person who wrote that. Look, that's why divorce lawyers exist, and people can badmouth divorce lawyers, and we're dealing with misery, but that's the civil way out, right? I mean, people are going to not like each other. People are going to hate their spouse. People are going to do bad things to their spouses. There's a way civilly that we're allowed to separate and disentangle ourselves, and it is through a divorce. And divorce might sound like a terrible process, but if you need to get away from your spouse, that's the way to do it. You do it civilly, you do it cooperatively, and believe it or not, Jesse, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of divorces that are done very amicably. People just come to that point in their lives where they know they're better off moving in their own separate directions. They work it out, they share their children, and they move on, and they're happier. And it can be done, and it should be explored if you feel that way about your spouse well before you get to the point of, God, I just want him or her dead. It's the right alternative to that kind of outcome.
So Victoria Goodwin is due in Clark County Court next week for her preliminary hearing, where we might learn more about the evidence investigators say they have against her. We'll keep everybody updated. We'll keep a careful eye on it. Randy Kessler, thanks so much for taking the time. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.